Welcome, everyone. This is Pilot Mules, and you're listening to LOTRO Players News, where we take a look at the latest news in LOTRO and hear LOTRO players. And this week we have with us Terry Adwin.
Hi.
And Calabathian.
Y'all are doomed. I'm here.
And today we are interviewing LOTRO producer Raninia.
Hey, folks. Nice to meet y'all.
Welcome to LOTRO Players News, Raninia, and it is time for you to first have our little new guest initiation, shall we speak?
Yeah.
Yes.
One of us.
Is that the initiation? Do you just chant that at me for a while?
No. We have questions. We're going to pepper you with questions.
Oh yes. And this is in addition to
Are we going to do that anyway?
Yes.
No, but we have like questions that every guest gets to answer.
Yes.
Sure, as long as none of them are my security questions, I think we'll be okay.
Okay, fine. Oh, I hope.
No.
No. I hope they're not any of your security questions.
Just the Netflix password.
Yes. Now, our question is, how did you get into Token, into LOTRO, and usually I say community for the third one, but this, I guess, is becoming an employee with Standing Stone Games.
Sure. So, my first experience with Tolkien was when Fellowship of the Ring came out back in, what was that, like 2002, 2003, something like that. I didn't have really a lot of familiarity with the books before that, but after watching Fellowship in theaters, I had a really great time with it. I ended up trying to read the books and failing miserably. Just was a little too dense for me at the time. I was reading a lot more like historical fiction and sci-fi and stuff like that, and fantasy wasn't as much my speed book-wise. And it wasn't until many years later that I finally was able to read those books. So the movies were the entry point for me initially, and then it was a couple of the games that came out. Two Towers on the PlayStation 2 was still a ton of fun. Battle for Middle-earth, and then LOTRO ultimately. Sometime after LOTRO went free to play, I think I joined. I think it was about 2011, 2012. I want to say I had a human burglar that I played on Winfola. I didn't get super far into the game, maybe to Lone Lands, I think it was. And it was an interesting experience, but I was it was around that era when a bunch of games started going free to play, and my friend group and I were bouncing around a bunch of different ones. So I enjoyed my time in LOTRO, but it didn't make it stick. So it wasn't until I was getting ready to talk to Standing Stone about their opening for a producer that I went back to LOTRO and started playing a lot more heavily. And I'm afraid that I've forgotten your third question.
Oh, it's how you got working with Standing Stone Games.
Yeah. So I was I had left my previous position, and I was interviewing in a couple different places, and Standing Stone was a really compelling opportunity. Lord of the Rings Online at that time was about to turn 14 years old, and there's not a lot of games in the market that are remotely that old, let alone still that old and thriving. And the team was really nice to meet with and talk with. And I was really impressed at the work that was still being done on the game and just how much more opportunity there was. My time coming back to the game and playing it, I felt like there was a lot of stuff here still, right? This is a game that's been around for a long time, and when a game's around for this long, it's not by accident, right? There's something there that's keeping people engaged. There's something there that's keeping folks, working on it, interested in it, excuse me. And so, based on those conversations that I had with the team when I saw playing the game, I thought it was going to be a really interesting opportunity and a really great fit. And that's a little over a year later now, and it's been a interesting and fun journey for the most part. Besides times like yesterday.
Besides, like, yes. Welcome to the team.
Mayday! SOS!
Yeah, unfortunately, live issues are sort of a fact of life in any live service game. It's not my first, it's not my longest, but it and it won't be my last. I can confidently assume.
Yes, that is the challenges of any online game. I am pretty sure.
Mm-hmm.
So then let's head into LOTRO itself, and let's begin with, all right, it's our 15th anniversary, as we noted in here, and it's anything you want to say about reaching our 15th anniversary, and is there anything particularly new this year?
Oh, it's a very quiet one for us. We don't really have a lot going on for this one.
Like a quinceañera is quiet.
Yeah, I think quinceañera is sort of a good reference point for the energy we were trying to bring to this anniversary. Yeah, there's a lot going on. Let's start with personally for me, what I was most excited about when we were talking about it this update. That would be Yondershire. We have not done a lot of work in the Shire in the past 15 years. I can't remember if it was like 2007 or 2008 that there was some additional changes made to the Shire and some new things brought in, but it's been a long time. So it was really exciting to sort of go back, to expand upon the Shire, to sort of get the opportunity to do the Shire in a way that we can now that we couldn't back then with some of our modern tools and our modern techniques. Both in terms of the way that we built the landscape, but also that we designed the world and sort of the broader experiences. I think a lot of the stories, I know folks have only just gotten their feet with the quests today, but there's a lot of really, really cool quests in there. I just love the Hobbit flavor of it. It's a very different speed, even compared to what we put out with the Angle or Gundabad. It's just so different from a lot of the other questing that you see, not only in other games, but even within LOTRO itself. And it was nice to be able to take that opportunity. There's some really fun Easter eggs that I'm excited to see if players are able to find. I won't say anything, but I guess one little tease on that because I can. Just keep an eye out on the pigs. Pigs, yeah. Just
Okay,
we got to be careful with the pigs. Then.
Are they ninjas? I mean,
you'll have to take a look and figure it out.
that's another game.
Okay, we
this
will
little
have to see
piggy
about
went
this.
to market. This little piggy sneaked around in the bushes. I mean,
I don't know. Anyway, concerning the timing of Yondershire, was it intentionally decided that the 15th anniversary would be a good time to do the Yondershire, or is that mainly a coincidental on the timing for that?
It wasn't entirely coincidental. It was sort of when we were starting to talk about, okay, what are the updates that we want to do in 2022? We started having that conversation. Gosh, I want to say it was something like September, August, sometime then. We started having those conversations in earnest. We'd sort of mapped out our tentative schedule of roughly when we thought our updates would come out. And we were like, hey, we should do something for the anniversary. What would make sense to do? Pretty quickly, actually, I think almost immediately, there was a push to do Yondershire. Like I said, we hadn't touched it in a while, so there was a lot of interest from the team. Folks who wanted to make quests, folks who wanted to make landscape, and they made a strong pitch, and we said, yeah, let's do it. This makes a lot of sense. It's an opportunity to go back to sort of where it all began in a way, and celebrate our 15th in a way that, hopefully we'll let new players know and also returning players what LOTRO really is all about. It's not like a lot of other MMOs. It's not about killing dragons all the time. Even though we just gave you the opportunity to kill one.
for the third time.
It's also about checking what's going on at your local post office, right?
Right.
And helping plan a party. That's important stuff in LOTRO too.
Of course.
That's important stuff in the Shire, at least. I mean, nosy hobbits and everything else.
Well, you got to remember, we have planned parties in other locations. I mean, we did wedding planning in Gondor, for example.
Exactly. That's an important
With
part of
hobbit
LOTRO.
input.
Unfortunately.
I don't think there's a way to plan a party without having a hobbit involved.
Yes. especially with my characters. All right, then let's then head on to the next question then, and that is, do you have any announcements to make in relation to yesterday's downtime that we could pass forward?
Sure, so I can speak a little bit as to what happened. I know Cord put some information on the forums. I don't remember the full scope of what he mentioned. So basically, the issue revolved around Runekeeper legendary item satchels that when Runekeeper players logged onto their characters mysteriously disappeared. So we were able to figure out relatively quickly that the issue was specific to the new legendary item Runekeeper Satchels, and it was specifically just the Runekeeper Satchels and nothing else. We were able to determine shortly after that a bug that we had tried to fix, where Runekeeper Ally Satchels were not able to appear cosmetically on characters, was the cause of this. The short version of this essentially is that the way that the satchels were created back in like October of last year, they were in the back end of the data miscategorized as to the type of item that they were, and that was the reason why the game wasn't able to display them on your character correctly. So what we did to fix that bug was we fixed that data issue in the back end and recategorized them. The problem, however, was that we improperly versioned the items. So basically, the items that were previously miscategorized weren't properly updated to the new categorization. So when those new items were loaded, the game didn't know what to do with them because it didn't know what those were anymore. And so as a result, that's what caused them to get disappeared temporarily. So we were able to fix that pretty quickly. A lot of the issues...
game, me too.
Yeah.
I don't know what to do with this. I'm going to vanish it.
It's like when you're cleaning your room and you don't know where to put some of the stuff, and you're just like, I'll just hide it under the bed, right? No one will look there. Unfortunately, we don't quite have that privilege. So the biggest, that didn't take us super long to figure out and implement the fix. The biggest issue is that because of the type of fix it was, it required a whole new build. Unfortunately, LOTRO is a very big game. And because LOTRO is a very big game, our builds take a really long time to do. So a large majority of the process yesterday involved us going and creating a new build. We took the opportunity while that was happening to examine a couple different other paths to go about in solving this issue. Unfortunately, none of them panned out. So we had to take that full time. And that's when we also realized, because those didn't pan out, that we also needed to implement a rollback. So that's why we rolled players back to 7 a.m. yesterday, which was about 2 hours before the downtime started. So that ended up taking most of the day and the night. And then this morning, we needed to do our final step, which is basically make sure that, hey, those folks that joined the game, their data had been reset to the night before, but they still had claimed the anniversary gifts that we'd given them. So we had to go and fix a number of players, something like 6,000 plus players who had joined in just that one. There's like 30 or 40 minutes that the servers were up. And so that we made sure that they could get their gifts. And then that's when we were able to open the worlds around 11 a.m. today, Eastern Time. So that went well. The only problem was that for a number of those players, they were not receiving their collector's editions of Mordor, Minas Morgul, and War of Three Peaks. So we did some investigation afterwards, and we realized very quickly what the issue was. However, this has become a thornier problem to resolve effectively. So we're still investigating solutions to fix it. We're reasonably confident that we'll be able to do something about it next week if we have to, but if in the meantime we're seeing if there's something we can do more short-term to get the items that those folks were expecting back into their possession. But unfortunately, I don't have any specific time frame for you, but I want to say reasonably confident that this is not something that's going to drag out through the entire anniversary. All of those folks will be made whole. We will be providing those gifts to you. Don't worry. You don't have to go and submit CS tickets for them. We know exactly who you are. We will find you. We will get you your present. It's like reverse taken.
That's not threatening at all.
Yeah, that's not
They're going to find us.
murdering
And
you.
they're going to fix us.
We know who you are. We will find you.
Yes.
Well, listen. I'm just politely saying it's like Taken, except instead of getting a gun, you get a present with, a carry-all in it. That's way better.
Okay.
But so what I'm actually hearing in all this is, man, it was a really, really long night for everybody involved trying to get this so that the game could reopen.
Yeah. It was a long day yesterday. It was a lot of us were able to thankfully get some sleep. We were waiting for things to sort of run in the background, and as a result, most of us were able to take a break and not be focused while things were propagating and such. But yeah, it was a late night and it was an early morning, so I think we'll all be enjoying this weekend particularly.
Yeah. I didn't quite grasp originally this thing about collector's edition stuff in there. It wasn't until I started logging in and had all these boxes appearing in my inventory, including that collector's edition. Wait, did I already have these things? I guess I have.
Yeah, we know that there's a lot of confusion from folks because in the producer's letter I'd mentioned that the standard editions of those expansions were going to be available for VIPs.
Right.
And so then when we said, surprise, we're also giving you we're giving everybody the collector's editions for free, that there were some people going, well, no. It's the standard editions and it's just for VIPs, and other people arguing, no, it's the collector's editions. And that's definitely something for us to be mindful about. But, we don't regret giving out some really cool presents this year. It was our 15th. It's a big year. Not a lot of games get this far, and,
Right.
we're excited to have many more to come.
Yes. Let's then look at what else we've got here. And we were talking earlier about Yondershire. And of course, now we're doing quests in the Shire again and all this stuff. And it makes people think about hobbits. And whenever we think about hobbits, we start thinking about river hobbits. And I was wondering, what's the status on that? Is it just a pipe dream state? Or is this a forget about it state? Or is this a serious talking about it state? Or is it next update state? Or
So I can't talk about the next update yet.
Right.
We only finally got Yondershire and 33 generally functionally out the door today. So
Right.
It's a little early to talk about what comes next. As for Ribbit Hobbits more broadly, I think that what folks are talking about is wanting them as a playable race, and to answer that specific question, I think that most likely they will be our next playable race. When that'll be is something that is still a little bit up in the air. There's interest in doing that internally. Folks really want river hobbits, which honestly, personally, I can't say that I get it. I think they're all hobbits. Like they're nice, but whatever. These ones swim. I get it. It's exciting.
Okay, but no, see, this is the opportunity for us to get hobbit champions finally in the game.
That's her hope, yes.
Yeah.
As opposed to
lore reasons.
I have 5 champions on my main server, so I'm only missing. I'm missing hobbits. I don't have a hobbit champion because you can't make them.
Okay, well, that's good to understand.
Well,
But
if we just get river hobbits, though, we can make a brawler, and then we'll have drunken hobbits that live down by the river.
I mean, to be fair, there are rivers in the Shire. You can have that experience now.
It's true. We just make them official.
It's something we still want to do, but it's not something that's imminent by any stretch. I think there's some questions to figure out in terms of how do we really make River Hobbit special?
Right.
I think that they're definitely a very logical next place for us to go, having done the High Elf and the Stout Axe before them. This is not like a commitment that they will be the next one.
Right.
But right now, the next playable race, when it happens, River Hobbits are a decent bet.
All right.
Wouldn't put the mortgage on it, though.
Yes.
But do the river hobbits dance? Because if so, they need to river dance.
You know what? I'll make a note of that. That's a good. I think that the lore folks might be upset about that, though. We'll have to see.
The High Elves got a ballet, so I don't know that the lore folks have a leg to stand on at that point.
Well, let's see. I could just imagine that the Gladden hobbits have clogging. Yes.
Yeah. Similar to the jig that's already in the game.
We just got to get the nice clogs for everybody. Make it start.
Have to make nice clogging sounds. Nice wooden,
Well, they have big feet, so they'd be really huge clogs.
Oh, yeah.
Ceremonial.
Basically, when hobbits get into boats, those are their clogs.
Do they clog in the boat, or do they clog with the boat? How does that work exactly?
I'm pretty sure they clog with the boat. That's actually how the river hobbits travel. They just strap their boats onto their feet, and then they just go down the river.
So is that like jet skiing, but without the engine?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
They just need a sail.
Mm-hmm.
They won't go very fast.
Concept art for somebody to put together.
I would have thought that the clogging is done so that they so be a paddle boat, and that the clogs help to power the paddle.
We are in Boston. I would love some swan boats for river hobbits. I'm not going to lie.
No, you get your swan boats in Gondor. Come on.
Oh, that's true.
What would they be in the Shire, though? Would they be like hobby horse or pie or something? Instead of this little horse head, they just have like a pie? Or,
Hobby pie?
Hobby pies.
Hobby pies.
Yes. Now, let's then slightly reiterate on there. You said earlier that you can't tell us about what's coming in the next update. Does that mean you can't even give us the slightest hint, or you give us a slight hint but nothing specific?
Okay, well, I can give you a little bit, but it's going to be very vague, and you're going to be upset with me later. So,
vague.
So one of the things I've talked about before is that this year, this anniversary is such a significant one that we've been really thinking about it as sort of the 15th anniversary year, not just the one day or the month of April. And so we talked about that a little bit with some of the changes that we made with Update 32 and what we did with the angle, what we did with air warehousing and all the other pieces of that update. And similarly, with Update 33 with Yondershire, revisiting that. It's something that I think is there's going to be some of those themes are going to be part of the coming update. There still are specifics to be determined for us in terms of what that will actually look like. We know pretty well at a high level what we're doing. We're decently along at this point on it, but just think about the 15th anniversary year.
All right. Very well.
Nothing to do with pigs, I promise this time.
Nothing to do with
pirates. Pirates.
No, that'll be the September update. No.
Okay.
Yes. Now, one of the things that's happening around this time is we're starting to wind down on our first season of our legendary item reward track. Now, I was wondering if there are any lessons that were learned during this first season that you plan to apply for the second season.
Yeah, I think in general, the season's not over, obviously. We still have a little less than a month before the season ends and the next season begins. But I think generally speaking, we've been pretty happy with the way that the reward track has played out. I know initially when we started talking about it, there were some folks who were really excited. There's some folks who are really concerned. I think generally speaking, the folks who were concerned have sort of turned around on it and been okay with it. Though I'm sure there are plenty of exceptions that the comments will inform me of later. I think one of the lessons that we took away from it is the way that we handled the reward variety was not as exciting as it could have been. One of the things that we had talked about before release was about cosmetic items, and we ultimately decided not to include new cosmetic items in the first season. That will be changing for season 2, and it's something we're looking to do more of in the future. We think that there's a good opportunity there. We don't want the reward track to just be about cosmetic items. We still want you to be, getting items for your legendaries. But generally speaking, that's something that we want to do more of. The other thing that we're interested in, that we're still sort of trying to understand player behavior around, is the way that runes factored into the reward track. Obviously, for a lot of folks who've been playing for a while, you had a lot of runes banked up for years and years and years of them.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, so we expected that there would be a lot of folks burning through those runes, and I've seen frankly ludicrous amounts of folks completing things to like 200 or 400 levels, basically.
400 levels.
Yeah, I mean, if you want that much ancient script, that's more power to you. But it's left us in a state where I think most folks are definitely depleted a bit on their runes. Some folks more than others, certainly. Which is interesting to see, because it's going to affect the way that Season 2 plays out for them. If you had a ton of runes before and you burned them all in this first season, then you didn't have to do a lot of engaging with the reward track on a day-to-day basis. It was sort of like a one and done for you. So with the second season, we're expecting that fewer folks will be in that sort of position, that more folks will have reasons to re-engage with the reward track on a daily or weekly basis, depending on the play style that they have. And that should change the way that people experience it and how they feel about it. So we're hoping that makes things more positive, but it's something we're eager to see. And it's part of the reason we changed the reward structure as well, to increase the value of the rewards that you're getting as you make progress. We'll see how that plays out. I'm cautiously optimistic about it. I think it's really cool, and I'm personally excited to make progress on my character with the reward track in the second season, to earn some of those sweet new cosmetics, because I am a completionist and it's a disease. But what are you gonna do?
Yes. All right. Now, also relating to the reward track, there are one of the challenges with reward track is that whenever you open it after logging in, you're placed right at level 1, and once you hit,
it's really hard to get to where you're supposed to be at, so you can figure out where you're claiming it, because the sideways scrolling is not helpful for finding where your spot is on the track.
Yeah, we've heard a lot of feedback on the UI around the reward track, both before it came out and since. We've got a number of improvements planned. We did actually release a couple while we were going through the reward track the first season. So I mean, folks probably saw the timer come in, the pips in the bottom to help you sort of keep track of where you were in your progress. We have more changes planned for future updates, including for smaller patches. So we're going to be continuing to improve the presentation and the user experience around that reward track. The feedback has been really helpful in helping us prioritize what things are going to make the biggest impact for people. But it's one of those things where we're going to keep iterating on that for months and months and months to come, as we learn more about what really works and what isn't doing its job well enough.
all right. Now, one of the things that's expected in the next couple of months is for Anor to reach Gundabad, which means Anor, I mean, unless there is a surprise level jump on the main servers between now and then, which I think is highly, highly unlikely, Anor is going to be reaching the level cap of the main servers in about 3 months. And I was wondering if there's been any decision yet on what's going to happen to Anor once it reaches this main level cap.
Yeah, we haven't quite made a decision yet. We've been leaning in one way. I won't say what that way is, but I'll outline the two camps. So there's two schools of thought here. Basically, there's one school of thought that says once Anor reaches Gundabad, we release Gundabad onto it, and we treat Anor like another live server. Except this one is a legendary world, right? Maybe we decide to remove that designation at that point and convert it into a complete live server, the way that Arkenstone and Evernight and Graphical and everyone else is playing. That's got some advantages in the sense that we know that folks have built communities on Anor. They've really enjoyed the progression that's been there, and having folks transfer off of that and coordinate amongst themselves to figure out what world they're moving to is, it's a tricky process. It's not the most enjoyable experience for folks who built a community. And, anytime a world goes away, there's always a little bit of a loss of that kind of community because the whole world doesn't go to the same place. They all sort of scatter across the other worlds. So, there's definitely some interest in keeping that community together and then, having it potentially grow. The second school of thought is, the legendary worlds were an experiment that we wanted to try on, or sort of the first world to complete that experiment. And as such, we should give everyone the opportunity to move on, take their characters to whatever other world they wanted to, and continue playing as they were before. I'm not sure where we'll end up yet. We will definitely make a decision in the next few months. Now that update 33 is past us, we can sort of think about what the more immediate future holds with Anor. And we'll make a decision about that and announce it definitely before it would make that transition into Gundabad proper, one way or the other. But what that is yet is still TBD.
And it sounds like then when Shadowfax reaches that level, things are going to be even more complicated because they have this special rule set, that Aya Sauron thing, to add on top of the questions that you have for Anor.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a broader conversation around where the difficulty system will be at that point,
right?
And what changes we'll have to make, and what we want to do with it. But yeah, Shadowfax is certainly trickier. I think part of the interest of that world is that it is an opportunity to play through the game and really run through to the caps and experience the end games of each expansion in the most consistent way you can at the moment, right? You don't really have that opportunity on Live Worlds unless you're playing with a really large group of people who are all using Tortoise Stones, right? That's like the closest comparable thing right now that we have. So there's going to be, I think there's going to be a bit of sadness when inevitably we have to make that decision, because there's no perfect way to end that sort of thing, right? Either it becomes a normal server, and we have to either remove the leveling XP, or we have to change something about it so that it no longer has the ability, it has the cadence of a new update every couple months, or we close it down and we let folks sort of scatter to the four winds among the other worlds. But I think we have until next year to make that decision. So I'll milk all the time I've got before I make my call.
The silver lining being, of course, that with the Treebeard server, you won't have to worry about making any decision on that for the next 10 years.
Oh yeah, we've got a good decade there with that one. Next time we'll do an even slower server, and that'll be great.
All right. Yes. Now, speaking of other worlds, how's the progress going along for allowing transfers off of the retired worlds that are currently closed, but some people have their old characters on there that they would like to pull up? For example, I don't know if you have your Winfola characters are accessible if you transferred them or not, or if they're locked away from you.
I actually haven't checked, but they should be. I'm playing on the account that I had when I first started playing. I was able to recover it, so presumably I should have my Human Burglar. So the Dark Worlds continue to be something that we're working on. It's been something that's had to take a back seat as a result of other work that we've had come up, like, for example, the downtime we had yesterday and today. So it's one of those things where that's still a high priority project for us. We're at this point, I feel like we're pretty close. There's some hardware work that needs to be completed and some testing that needs to be done. And while that doesn't sound necessarily like a lot, that the configuration and the actual then testing and fixing could take a decent amount of time. And hopefully that's the last step. One of the things with this project that we've discovered is new work along the way that we weren't expecting. The joys of software and hardware development. So I'm hoping that we're close. But it's one of those things where, because we've had some prioritization changes internally because of some of the live issues, for example, on LOTRO, but also on DDO, that has taken time away from projects like this.
Lie. My hope still springs eternal that someday we'll be able to move characters from EU servers to US servers.
Don't hold your breath.
I'm not holding my breath, but you can't kill the hope in me.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say that that's, never say never, but that is a really big undertaking to get that to a place where we can make that realistic. And, I think there's definitely a fair bit of interest for that, for folks, both to get to Evernight and leave Evernight. But it's not something that I want to promise, because it's frankly not something we've seriously discussed in a while.
Oh, yeah.
There have been some discussions about it. We sort of talk through the high level work, and we think that it is not impossible, but not impossible does not mean not extremely difficult, unfortunately. So another one of those things to patiently wait for.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. It's on my Christmas list every year.
I suspect it'll be there for a few more years.
Yeah.
Yes.
I gotta have something to put on a Christmas list. I mean,
You just want Santa to disappoint you? That's mean, but all right.
yeah, weird flex, I know, but
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, every year I ask Santa to make EU to North American server transfer possible, and every year he doesn't do it. I mean, what a lazy engineer.
Yes. Yes. Now, concerning skirmish soldiers, they seem to be a bit, well, to say they're behind the curve is, I think, a little bit of understanding. I was checking how my herbalist is doing on one of my characters, and I noticed it says my 140 character is like heal for 300, heal for 300, heal for 600, heal for 300. When I've got 600,000 morale, that's sort of nothing compared to the damage.
It's more moral support than anything else.
Yes, it's for moral support.
cheerleader, okay? Let's just...
Yes.
Yay!
I was wondering if I suppose it's out of the question of ever having any time in order to maybe buffing up, say, skirmish soldiers or anything like that at the higher levels, where, since I think it was level 100 is the last time in which any ability to rank up your soldiers came around.
I certainly wouldn't say that it's out of the question, but it is definitely not a huge priority for us right now.
Right.
Like, that's something that I would be skeptical of us getting to this year.
Right.
The work itself isn't necessarily difficult, but it is time-consuming.
Right.
In part because it has been so long since we've done the updates. The other piece of it is, frankly, skirmish soldiers are like weirdly busted in a lot of ways.
Oh.
When you were saying that they're behind the curve, I was thinking about how, and they're over the hill, and then they're under the hill, and they're next to the hill, and they've been around everywhere to the other side and all around the world, and they're back.
I mean, not only are they useful in skirmishes, which is debatable, but I mean, you get the skirmish soldier landscape tokens. So in theory, you could have somebody running around with you on the landscape to do whatever.
Right. If you want to babysit a hyperactive child, that's an experience you can have in LOTRO.
Harry, they're all hamsters now.
Well, I mean, the herbalist used to be marginally useful and isn't anymore.
Actually, the herbalist still acts as a tank for me sometimes.
Oh, that's nice. It's nice to know that monsters are also offended by the hyperactivity of the skirmish soldier. I mean, to answer your question, it's not impossible. It's just that there's just a lot of work to really make that happen.
Right.
And it's the kind of thing that, like, if we're going to invest the time to update the skirmish soldiers, we should really invest the time to, update the skirmish soldiers. We haven't done a lot of scoping internally around it, as far as I've been here, at least. I'm sure that there's been some work previously before my time that I'm just not aware of. But looking at the problems that I am aware of based on the conversations I've had, it's the kind of thing where we would like to do more with that system. We'd like to do stuff with skirmishes again, but there's a lot of problems to be ironed out up and down that whole system, the economy, the tech underpinning it. There's a reason that we ended up moving away from skirmishes and doing missions. I don't think skirmishes are dead necessarily. I think that there's a lot of really valuable stuff we can do with the format that they exist in. But we have to solve a lot of foundational problems that we just frankly haven't had the time or the focus for, in part because of some of the problems that were introduced are just so big.
All right. And is part of that the reason why the event was postponed this year? The one involving
that was part of it.
Yeah, that was part of it. All
yeah, right. I like the idea of the Elements event. I mean, we had a rough go of it last year. That was before my time, but I did do some reading and talking to folks about it. I don't want to kill that event, let me put it that way, but I want to make that event more than just a passing fancy. I want it to be worth players' time. I think, generally speaking, that's something we want to do more of with the stuff that we put in LOTRO. And I think some events in the game right now are not necessarily pulling their weight. And they're worth examining further. Ill Omens was one where it wasn't sort of a turnkey event. There was a lot of work that needed to be done just about every year to update the prize structure and things like that, and keep things functional, let's say.
Right.
And just looking at it compared to the other things that we had going on this year, it just didn't feel like it was super necessary. I mean, I don't want to speak for the whole community, but the sense that I've gotten is, when we first released the events calendar and Ill Omens wasn't on it, there was definitely some frustration from folks who missed it and liked it. But since then, I really haven't heard a lot of talk about it. We just made all of the skirmishes in the game free.
Yeah.
And I haven't heard anyone talk about Ill Omens yet. Now, I'm sure someone will again correct me in the comments. But I think my point is that there wasn't necessarily a huge appetite for it previously in the form that it was currently in. It has potential, but we haven't achieved it yet. We have more work to do there. But it's not something that we think we're going to be able to accomplish this year.
Understood. Now, I have one more question before we go to other people's questions, and that has to do with power scaling. I get the impression that power grows at a pretty flat rate, while damage to power from things like diseases looks like a scaling with damage to morale. So even though morale goes up at a very steep curve, and it's a relatively flat curve with power. So as a result, if you have the slightest disease put on you or the totem in the area or anything like this, your power is gone before you realize you got this effect going on. And it's sort of a frustration I have because, why can't I do anything? My power is all drained because of this effect that's in here, and you can't get rid of the effect because you don't have any power to get rid of it.
Yeah, it's an interesting problem. I mean, I think for the most part, we've moved away from power draining mechanics and most
Oh no!
No, there are plenty of them around. Unfortunately,
there's plenty of them in Gundabad.
There are definitely several of them in Gundabad. We got to give you a reason to have those potions. But I think that we moved away from them in lots of other types of content, especially at higher levels. I think that there's definitely a problem with scaling in those cases. I think in some cases that honestly sounds like a bug where we're probably using, like you said, different scaling formulas for morale versus the one that we've used for power. But there's a bigger issue with power, which is that really for most of the game, it's basically useless.
Yes.
Or I shouldn't say useless. It's so useful that you completely ignore it because you have so much that it never matters. And it only matters in cases like this, where suddenly you're like, oh crap, I have no power. Apparently I had a disease put on me. I think that there's probably value in the short-term fix of looking at those scaling profiles to see if the power drains are pulling the right amount of power down. They shouldn't be taking you to, oh crap, I have no power and literally can't do anything in 1 second. You should have an opportunity to cleanse it. But there's a broader thing there of what is power's purpose? How do we make it a resource mechanic that actually is engaging and interesting at all parts of the game, not just when things go horribly, horribly wrong.
Right. Yeah. It looks like it's there's an interesting balance around level 75. It seems to be about right, but it seems like after that point is when things start going awry. Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, I'll make a note of that, and it's something for us to keep in mind as we have more legendary worlds continue their progression into those areas.
Yeah, because it's definitely an issue of, I had 6,000 power just a second ago. What the heck happened? And now I have nothing.
Yes.
And it's that fast. It's like from 6,000 to 0.
Yeah. That's the problem. You go through 90% of the fight at 6,000, so it goes down to 0.
Well, yeah. But then you take a potion, and the potion only gives you 50. And you still can't do anything.
Why? Well, yes, there is. I think some potions do give you more than that. It's just that if you don't act very, very fast, your power is going to be instantly drained that you just took the potion for.
Yeah.
Which is right. That concludes my questions. So Calabathian has a couple. Calabathian, what do you have?
Oh, during a conversation, I believe it was a hunter that we were raiding with and everything, was kind of had this question about, will warden drops be reduced in raids, like, Hidden Horde, so that players that are not wardens will actually get something that they need, because apparently it's dropping a lot for people who aren't wardens. So a hunter is getting a lot of warden gear, and they were kind of frustrated about that. So I guess the more general question in that is raid drops. Have you heard anything? I mean, is there any... I mean, are we still adjusting those, or are they just kind of like, okay, low priority, we'll come back to them some other time? Where's the status on that?
Yeah. What do we mean by warden gear exactly? I guess it's going to be a good question.
Yeah. I'm thinking warden gear would be stuff that is, usable. Basically, a warden would find more useful than a hunter. Because the guy who was talking about it plays, I believe, a hunter in the raid, and that was his thing, was, I can't actually use anything I'm getting because it's, I can use it for my warden, but the hunter is kind of different.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely we know that there's frustrations with the way that raid loot is sometimes distributed. I'm not super familiar with the specific case about hunters getting warden gear. I'd have to ask a few questions of the team about that. But we do know that a lot of the frustrations with folks is related to, having a hard time getting pieces that are valuable to them. That's part of the reason that we introduced the item swap barter on the Hidden Horde raid, to give folks an opportunity to get pieces for the set that they wanted, and not just sort of have a mishmash of different set bonuses, which is always fairly unsatisfying to get. So we wanted to give folks some amount of RNG protection. And when we introduced the Amber Barter for Hidden Horde in the next, I don't know specifically when that is planned for right now, but next weeks and months in the future, that'll give you additional opportunities to earn the raid pieces that you're focused on, as opposed to some of the random drops. I mean, some of the nature of RNG is that it's always going to be random, right? And sometimes that's frustrating, and sometimes that's exciting. I think I understand that, as a player, I always want to get the gear that I care for as soon as I can get it, which hopefully means yesterday. And it's always frustrating when I have to spend weeks and weeks and weeks running the same instances and raids and not getting the drops that I wanted. I was the third rogue in my progression raiding guild back in World of Warcraft, so I know the struggle of, even when a piece drops for you, it's not one you're going to get, because that was the Master Looter era, so there were two people ahead of me who had more points than I did to get those pieces. But at the very least, I didn't have to spend a lot of my DKP when finally something dropped that only I could bid on. I think that there's more work for us to do around drops in general, improving the way that we are doing drops and the kinds of gear that we do drop. Right now, all of the gear that we create in the game is handcrafted. We're going off of templates, so it's not like literally, someone is, hand writing each decimal point. But generally speaking, it is a pretty expensive endeavor for us to create gear, and we're doing some work this year that should hopefully improve the process by which we're able to make that kind of stuff and create greater variety in the kinds of pieces that we can provide, and therefore change some of the way that the drops are structured. How that will actually play out at this time, I'm not sure. We haven't made decisions around what that will end up looking like at a granular level, and frankly, those are conversations that I'm not going to have huge input on. That's mostly me letting the systems team do their job. But yeah, it's not something that you just have to deal with forever. It's something we're aware of and we're going to examining, but it's not an easy fix to find that balance between helping the unlucky players and not just giving everybody the gear in the first few runs that they do.
Oh, yes. I mean, I guess my RNG has, in this one case, been good instead of what it usually is, which is, people actually have joked that, they play with me and they, I have really bad RNG online, and then, they actually play an offline tabletop game and their character dies because, of my dice. And it's like, they blame me and I'm like, okay, go ahead. But, I know it's bad. It's my dice once tasted blood and now they can't get enough. They're bloodthirsty. But I actually in the raids have mostly gotten might-based gear, and I play a champion, so it actually does work.
Yeah.
So my might-based, classes can benefit from that. But honestly, all of the drops that I've gotten, I think maybe except for one, have been might-based, and I'm like, that's where I got the idea that maybe they were tailored a little bit more towards the class that, for the RNG that, was getting them. But yeah, I have no idea how the game works. So this is why I'm not.
I'm thinking it might be based on armor type. The thing is that wardens and hunters are both medium, so therefore you have vitality based armor and you probably have agility based armor. Mm-hmm. And the wardens, of course, are more towards the vitality side, unless they're a yellow line hunter. Yellow line warden, and a hunter is more likely to be wanting more agility in there. So you've got this conflict in here, and this probably just says, oh, you are a medium class and is awarding you medium armor. Now, anyone who wears heavy armor cares about might. So it's not a question
all the
about
heavy armor pieces are going to be might based.
Yeah, it's going to be a question whether it's going to be might emphasized or vitality emphasized. Might make a difference to some
and it's
people.
the secondary attributes too. So if you get something with critical defense as opposed to crit rating or parry or something like that, because I get my base gear all the time if I join the raids, but it's not necessarily useful for a champion.
Yeah. All the gear that does drop for folks is based on the armor type of the class they're playing, as you folks are describing. So, as you're pointing out, with heavy gear, you basically have folks who generally want the same stats, but the stat prioritizations are a little bit different. So if you're upgrading from a weaker piece to a slightly better piece, you're more likely as a heavy class to find an upgrade because it's more likely that something will be useful to you, even if it's not the best in slot piece. Whereas if you're a hunter, for example, you might get a piece that is not as suitable to a DPS spec, but is more suitable to a tank spec. And as a result, you're going to be frustrated because, it's much further away from even being useful, let alone being best in slot. So some of that is just the reality of the way that the classes are structured and the way that we have loot available to us right now, because we only filter off of the armor type. We can't give you anything more specific than that, and leads to some groups like medium armor users having some more frustrations than others. But it's one of those things where it's especially problematic because hunters are a class that has DPS specs really. As a result, they have a much narrower band of stats that they care about, as opposed to the warden, which has a DPS spec but also has a tank spec, so is more likely to find a piece that, hey, maybe this isn't useful for my current set, but maybe I want to do some tanking in the future, and I can grab this for a second set so that I can run content on a different spec and help my raid group out in a different way. So like I said, we're looking at ways to improve that sort of thing. It's a tricky line to to deal with because it's there's never an easy solution for this sort of thing. But we definitely don't want players to feel like they're constantly getting gear that they can't use. That's not a fun experience, and we want to focus on giving players things that they enjoy.
Yeah, I think that's what they probably meant by the warden drops versus something they can use. I have one other question. I don't have too many. And this is from another one of our, mentioned by one of our other cast members on LPN. But elves have gotten elks. What are the chances that we'll get hobby horses for the Shire stablemasters? Or at least something, a different kind of mount other than the ponies and stuff. And I have to add, what are the chances of like fast travel in the Shire? Because I know it's a...
Oh, it was just added today.
Oh, it was?
Yeah, it was added
Well, then
today.
never mind. Go back to the hobby horses for the Shire stablemasters and forget about the rest of that. Or at least, something, I guess, particular to that region. And I guess, are there any plans to kind of do that for like the region? Like Bree may have the horses, but the Shire may have something else. Because I know Moria has goats or right now goats. I guess pigs too, but dwarves are like Gundabad has the goats and the pigs. Moria I think just has goats. We now have elks for the elves. So anything for the Shire and the Hobbit area.
So we give you fast travel in the Shire, and all you can think about is hobby horses and something besides ponies, huh?
Oh, that would be so great, though. Can you imagine watching everybody run around with the stable horses on the hobby horses? That'd be fantastic. The animation for the hobby horse is just hilarious anyway. And watching characters who are not hobbits, specifically high elves, ride around on hobby horses is probably one of the funniest things I've seen in the game.
So to answer your question, I think the chances of hobby horses are pretty low. I think hobby horses are a great gag mount, but it's one of those jokes that works really well because of how infrequent it is. And I think that certainly the folks who are really big into the lore would be particularly frustrated if we decided to replace all of the Shire mounts with hobby horses. There's also sort of an interesting experience for new players joining and suddenly experiencing as a hobbit the stable master and exclusively seeing hobby horses. I think that might throw them off a little bit. So I don't think that's something we'll be doing in the future, unfortunately. But I appreciate the sentiment. I also love the animation. It's a really well done and just comedy gold, frankly. As for another non-pony mount, never say never. I think it's tricky. There's not a ton of support in the books, as far as I'm aware, for hobbits and a non-pony animal. I confess I'm not the greatest lore reader. I don't know.
You could figure out a wagon ride.
There's potential there in the future for something that we could that we could do. Nothing specific is coming to mind right now, so I don't think the chances of us going that direction are particularly high, and certainly not soon. We did just touch up Yondershire. I don't think we're going to be going back and doing another part of the Shire, for a little while. It's just we have the opportunity with Middle Earth to hop around and do a lot of different stuff, especially as we've expanded it all directions for several years. So it's not to say that we couldn't revisit the Shire again. We absolutely can, and I'm hoping we should. But that's the kind of opportunity that we would take at that time, and we don't have anything specific planned for the Shire at this time. Well, besides the Yondershire, obviously.
How about when we get to where the Sothrons and stuff are, we get some mini Moomoks? Because I know the person who asked about hobby horses for the Shire is Sans. Would love to have a mini Moomok mount, and that would be hilarious to have a little bitty Moomok running around, like do. Yeah, anyway, just a thought. Yeah. It'll be a while till we get to there, but I'm just saying, Moomoks are fine.
When we get to Harad, in the distant future, we certainly would think about Mumoks at that time. Though I think a baby Mumok is probably the size of like a full-grown African elephant. So mini is more of a relative term than an absolute one.
Well, we're thinking about the size of the ones that are in the baby Mumok pets that you can.
Yes, which they have strangely deep, cavernous sounds to them that scared me the first time. We were in Gundabad, and I hadn't had a baby Mumok pet around me, and it suddenly starts going and then like shaking the walls, and I was looking around literally with my camera going, "What in the heck is that?" I was ready to fight.
Yeah, we would certainly look at stuff like that, by the time we got to Harad, but Harad is certainly many years away in the future. It's not somewhere we're planning to go imminently either. See, there's 2 spoilers for you.
Yeah. Okay, now we could scratch Harad off the list for next update.
Right, and the Shire. Look at that. 2 things you've gotten out of me.
All right. Do you have any more questions, Calabathian?
Nope, I'm good. Let's go to the LOTRO player, readers, and listeners if you want to.
All right. Yes.
Actually, can I interject a couple of comments?
Okay.
Since I have been very good about trying not to interrupt the conversation too much. But I wanted to go back because when Raninia was talking about early LOTRO days, like back in the early LOTRO days, you mentioned that you had played a human burglar and didn't get very far. And I have to say that human burglar was a brave choice. Still is a brave choice because a burglar is not an easy class to play. And human is the less popular choice for burglars because typically burglars you see hobbits. But my question is, you mentioned that you're playing the game again. Are you playing, obviously probably not a human burglar, but do you have just a single character that you focus on, or do you have a variety of alts? And if the latter, what is your favorite class?
Yeah, so I picked the human burglar because I played a rogue in World of Warcraft. So burglar felt like the most natural extension of the
Sure.
rogue. Not identical, certainly, but it's helped me understand the mechanics a bit better. I don't remember anything particularly dramatic about the leveling experience, so but also it's been like a decade, so that this might be related.
Well, and the game has changed a lot since then.
That's absolutely true as well.
Early burglar was a little bit painful.
Yeah. As for what I've been playing, I have been playing pretty much exclusively a human captain. I don't remember why I picked captain specifically. I started initially with a hunter, but then that became my admin character, and so I decided at that time I was going to play free to play. So that's when I recovered my original LOTRO account and started a new character, and I've been playing that human captain basically ever since. So I think I got the hunter maybe at a level 30 before that happened, so not super far, but enough that playing a hunter was fun. I was blue line, I think, and it was nice running around and shooting things. It was definitely more efficient than with my captain. Captain's a bit more of a almost a traditional stand and deliver kind of class.
That's fair.
But it's nice. Like, I appreciate having a little minion that follows me around and occasionally does something useful.
Very, very occasionally, if I know Captain Pats at all.
Yeah, they do their best. They try their hardest. Bless their hearts. But I've been playing Redline Captain now for a while, making decent progress in the game. But it's one of those things where nights like last night happen, and I don't end up playing as much as I would have hoped to.
Sure. Man, Krister would have loved to hear that, because Krister is the LOTRO Players News member who plays a captain. He's kind of the only one on the show who really knows captain, because none of the rest of us played at all. In fact,
I would certainly not say that I know captain, but I have played it.
We have every other Sunday group that we call the Rejects of Middle-earth, where we picked up classes that we didn't really care for or didn't know, and that's my captain. So, yeah, my main is a champion, as evidenced by what I mentioned earlier. I've 5 champions. Because it's a button mashy class and I don't have to think about what I'm doing. But my other question, or rather comment, because we touched on the reward track a little bit, but in addition to I love that cosmetic rewards are going to be coming into the reward track, because I'm not a fan of rewards at the moment, because random tracery boxes, I would love a better algorithm for them, or just instead of dropping the random tracery boxes, if we could get more of the things to barter for tracery of our choice. Because of the 5 or 6 I've gotten out of the reward track, I've had to scrap everything except for like 2, because I keep getting them for traceries I have 0 use for. So I don't know if there's maybe a better way to figure out what tracery comes out of the box, or maybe instead of a random tracery box, you just get a box where you can select tracery of your choice, maybe.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I talked about this a little bit with the just RNG drop stuff.
Mm-hmm.
This is sort of a related question. We are changing for season 2 the way that works. We'll see if people like that better or worse.
Okay.
I mean, the thing I want to be cautious about with traceries is like the track is not supposed to be your primary way of completing your allies. The track is supposed to be a way for you to make progress, right? And get opportunities for, either the character that you're maining or an alt or 2, right? Because you can contribute to it on all your characters, and as a result, you can get benefits on all your characters. So if you're just playing one character, or you're really trying to build an ally for one particular character, you're definitely going to have more things that you're going to disenchant for Ancient Script, which is still useful, but not as exciting as getting a tracery that is getting you closer to completing your ally. That said, if you are playing multiple characters, or you're just starting to build your allies, like my character is, it's nice to get all of these traceries because they give you more opportunities to do things. When I first got my ally and I was getting my first traceries, I didn't really care what I was slotting in because it was just whatever I had. And so I went through a lot of upgrades relatively quickly as I was getting more and more traceries from completing quests and making progress in the reward track. That was giving me stuff that I could replace that was just straight up better than the trash that I had slotted first because it was the only thing I had. So it's one of those things where as you progress further into the track, you are seeing more of the rewards that let you pick specifically the kinds of stuff that you're getting. But at the end of the day, the purpose of the track is to help you get started and make progress on this thing, not to help you finish it. The way that if you want to help finishing your allies, we talked about this when we first were talking about the system revamp last October. But it's really about playing higher level content to earn the tokens that let you optimize the traceries the way that you want.
Okay, so
and we're not planning to change that dramatically, even with the new season.
So here's my problem. As a solo player who doesn't get into group instances very often, I still managed to go into the changeover with a maxed out ally. Actually, both of my main allies were maxed out. So when I swapped over, all of the traceries that I got were teal, and what I'm mostly able to get from quest rewards are the purple ones, which aren't as good. So the problem I'm having is that it's not so much the ancient script, because I can get ancient script with no problem whatsoever, but it's the tokens that you would use to barter for the higher level, the teal traceries. You can't get those other than either group content or the reward track.
There are still some available from quests, and we're going to be continuing to add sources of especially the teal tokens to more things as we make progress in this level cap. Like the thing is, right, we're just 6 months into the Gundabad level 140 cap. There's still a good bit of time left before we're going to be making progress into the next level cap, and so we do want to encourage you to if you want those tokens and you want the best chance to get teal traceries, go on, try and join some additional group content, and put a group together to run a 3 player instance or 6 player instance. You don't have to go to a raid to get them. But if you want golds, if you want the best of the best, that's definitely going to be a while and take a lot more work to do. And that's intentional, right? Like this is golds are the best of the best. Once you get a gold, you generally don't need to replace it ever until the next level cap comes around, which is a good chunk of time. So we want to give you reasons to sort of stick around. The other thing I want to say is like I said, I've been playing with my ally, and obviously I'm leveling. I'm not at the end game. But I haven't needed to have the best traceries. I'm slotting purples and the occasional teal, and I'm just slotting basically whatever I'm getting. I haven't gone back to the archive in Rivendell and bartered for any specific traceries. And I haven't had any serious issues with getting through content. Now, I understand that it can be frustrating not to have the best thing that you can have, and you want to make as much progress toward getting that best thing as fast as you can. And it can be frustrating when the sources that you have available to you don't feel like they're contributing to getting there in the time frame that you would like to. But to that, it's sort of that same problem we were talking about with the hunter getting warden loot. Like there's a fine line for us always between how do we reward you in a way that is engaging without never giving you the stuff and also always giving you the stuff. We'll be making changes in season 2. But I want to be clear, like it's not like suddenly there's going to be a teal token every 5 levels or something like that. They're still going to be fairly infrequent because they are super valuable. Anytime we give you a token and the ability to directly choose a high level tracery like that, it's a lot more powerful than getting a random one.
Sure. I just probably would rather see those than the bunch of purple boxes.
Sure, but it's one of those things, right, where those purple boxes might be really useful if you have an alt who's just starting their allies, or an alt that you are just getting to, a new cap and they need to replace their traceries, right? There's value in that, and if you don't have an alt, right, it's more ancient script that you can use to pick out the purples that better fit your gear, or save those for when you get those teal tokens, so you can buy those from the barter.
Okay.
You can always start a 15th ally these days, so.
Let's then head to some questions from listeners, and we'll begin with Osriel, who asks, are there any considerations about revamping the movements and animations of our characters to make them feel more weighty and grounded? Especially running and jumping can feel quite floaty, and I think it would be a quality update as everyone loves a game that feels believable when we're running around.
Yeah, I would like to spend some amount of time this year looking at some animations. I don't have a specific list at the moment in terms of what we will be looking at, but especially a lot of the older races and classes. Those animations are, let's say, a lot less polished than, like stat-axe brawlers or something. So it's something we would like to do. If we're lucky, we'll be able to make some progress on that this year. But we'll have more to talk about later in the year, I'm sure.
All right. And then, all right. Then we'll go to TJ, who has a series of questions. Says, what can we expect in terms of graphical changes for LOTRO?
So I've talked about it before, where we're continuing to make improvements in terms of the graphical quality in the game, update to update, and making improvements there. In terms of the in-game models, hopefully the stuff that you're seeing in Yondershire is generally of a higher quality than the rest of the Shire. That would be good. But it's going to continue to be, chunks of the game as we're going through and making new updates. Sometimes we'll have opportunities to polish stuff in different areas that have previously existed, but we don't always get that opportunity. One of the things we did with Gundabad is we were able to polish up some assets that were in other parts of the game previously, so they benefited from that polish as well. In terms of the UI, we actually had a meeting earlier today talking about the legendary item panel that exists today and improvements that we want to make towards it. This is less of a, hey, let's fix this bug, or let's shift this text over or whatever, and it's more around, okay, what does version 2.0 look like of this, based on the feedback that we've gotten and the data that we've acquired. what have we learned, and how do we make this better? We're looking at some of those foundational pieces, and we wanna make improvements to them. The time frame for that is a little bit, it's very TBD right now, because we don't have a good sense yet of what the scope of the work that we want to do, and until we get that reasonably pinned down, we can't really say, okay, here's when it's going to happen.
Then, all right, before I get back to TJ's questions, he does want to know about fixing server issues, but in my mind, I'm wondering if this recent deprecation of the 32-bit client has anything to do with attempting to help our performance or anything like that, since I'm wondering if that's one of your major bottlenecks you have in keeping up to it, because lag does seem to be increasing, unfortunately, and I was wondering if that's one of your efforts to try to get rid of it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, 64-bit clients just generally perform better, right? There's, we know that our 64-bit client isn't perfect by any stretch, and there's further work to be done on it, but it still generally outperforms 32-bit on most all hardware that can run 64-bit. So that's going to be beneficial to us. That's part of the reason that we finally, made that call and said, okay, it's time for us to move beyond the 32-bit era. One of the reasons that we deprecated Windows XP was sort of to help move in this direction last year. And there's, conversations we're having and work that we're planning to do this, hopefully this coming year, that will get us further down that goal. I mean, one of the things that we did in 33, where there's a handful of behind-the-scenes updates that were made to the hardware and the servers and the game client. I previously mentioned that there was, I think I previously mentioned this, that there was a change that was made in 32 that we ended up having to disable when Spring Festival happened, because it caused an unexpected bug with auto bestow quests for festivals. So as a result, we had to disable that change and patch it. But unfortunately, because of the nature of the work, we weren't comfortable patching that until this update. So now that that's in, that should smooth things out a bit. Obviously, we had a huge day-to-day. We had huge concurrency numbers and queues on Evernight. So, the balance of that change is sort of outweighed by the stress that we ended up putting on the server with so many players. But yeah, that's a good problem for us to have there. But we're going to continue making progress on that later this year. We have work lined up for improving performance in all aspects of the game. One thing I've talked about before, but want to reiterate, is that lag that folks experience is not just limited to issues with the server. There's a fair amount of places where there are issues with the client, either because of the way that it's getting data from the server, or because of the quantity of data that it's receiving, or we talked about the netcode before and the way that was handling looking at your bandwidth caps and still relying on dial-up modems. So one of the things is that we still have in this game is there are plenty of places where we just have really inefficient data delivery algorithms that can back up even the best CPUs. And LOTRO is still primarily a CPU-based game. We don't really use the GPU as much as we could. So you see folks going, oh, wow, I have this amazing, NVIDIA or AMD card, and I'm still experiencing this lag on LOTRO. What gives? And it's because it's got less, the performance in LOTRO has less to do with your GPU and more to do with your CPU. So, if you're running, an i7 or an i5, those are pretty good chips, but we can send enough data at you that it doesn't matter. If you're opening your computer quest log and you've played the game for 15 years, you've probably completed some 7, 8, 9,000 quests, right? And that's a lot of quests to load the data for all at once. So there's things like that where we can improve the way that we deliver the information to the client in such a way that it doesn't strain CPUs nearly as much. And in that way, we can see performance gains that have nothing to do with the server. But it's a thing that we're continuing to play whack-a-mole in all directions. One of the other things that we did with 33 in the background was the systems team went through a whole number of skills in the game and changed the way that they operate in the back end. There shouldn't be any practical change in the way that they work from player perspective, but the way that the data looks at them, they're much more efficient now than they used to be. And that was part of the reason, for example, that we ended up deprecating Sikkim and replacing it with the Murder of Crows, was to make the Lore Master have a much more efficient operation. And that was a case where we couldn't fix the skill because of the foundational way that it summoned a whole bunch of animals to you at once. So we're continuing to make progress there. Every update we're basically putting out changes that are improving performance. We're making further progress with things like the 64-bit servers and updating our servers more broadly. We're testing out a number of those things. It's just not done yet, right? And it's not something that's going to be done overnight. It's not like one day you're going to log into LOTRO and there's going to be no lag. It's going to continue to exist, but we're going to keep chipping away at it until, hopefully one day you're looking back a year and you're like, wow, it was so much worse a year ago.
I remember,
and we've seen some of that already with looking back 6 months ago to when Gundabad released. It's a little bit better, I think. It's playable.
Playable, well, at least until there's one place where things get really laggy, and that's at the steep set. But that's why I imagined that the people who designed the steep set intentionally didn't put a couple of services there. That someone posted a message saying, "Why don't you have the service as a steep set?" It says, because the lag would be even worse if they did.
Yeah, I don't know that we specifically have done stuff like that. I haven't spoken to the world designers about that, but one of the things that we came out of Gundabad with was we improved some of our best practices around, creating parts of the world and creating, skills and quest content and stuff like that. And that has affected the way that we have built things like the Angle and Yondershire, so that those experiences are more performant. Because we're not, trying to draw a bajillion objects on the screen at the same time. For example, for folks who might remember Glooming Tarn at the beginning of Gundabad, there were some parts of the world where if you just looked at it, your FPS would tank, and it was just because there were a ton of objects that weren't set up in the most efficient way. We went through, we made those objects shared in many cases. We simplified the geometry sometimes, and it still looks like a beautiful zone, but it performs a hell of a lot better than it used to.
Actually, what I'm waiting for is a day when I can have a character at high level up, and right, that's 5-second lag. I think I just leveled.
Yeah, more work to be done.
The lag is really worrisome when you're in the middle of a raid and the entire party or half of them suddenly freeze in the middle of a fight, and it's like, oh no, I'm going to come out of this dead.
Yes. All right. Next one is, can we expect any changes to mounted combat after the legendary item changes? Or I would guess that could also add to bridles, I guess is a question in many people's mind.
Yeah, so we're working currently on the bridle replacement. That's something that Vastin's been working on for, in between the live issue that we had. He's been focusing his time on recently, so I don't know specifically when those changes will go into live. It's probably going to be a few months because it's a decent amount of work to replace those bridles, and then we'll want to do testing and reviewing to make sure that they're getting the job done.
Right.
As for mounted combat more broadly, we have no specific plans at this time to really take a closer look at mounted combat. Obviously Orion started recently, and he was the architect, I guess, of mounted combat based on what I've been told. So, we have folks who are pretty familiar with that system internally who we will definitely throw at the problem once we get to it. Just the reality is that mounted combat is a chunk of the game, and it's right in the middle there. But it is just that chunk of the game, so we don't have a crazy number of players who are going through Rohan and really engaging with that system. So it just doesn't make sense to throw a ton of people at that problem at this time.
Yeah.
It's not at the bottom of the list, but it is definitely something that is further down right now.
Okay, I was just saying, because isn't Shadowfax getting pretty close to Rohan?
I think Shadowfax is in Rohan already.
Yeah.
We're getting Helm's Deep in May, if I recall.
Okay. Then let's see.
Treebeard will get there too.
We'll just hope that mounted combat is at an appropriate state by the time Treebeard gets there.
Yeah, I mean, some of the performance issues that you experience without mounted combat is stuff that we're targeting more broadly, and we'll make that experience better in general. That's where we're putting most of our efforts right now, because that's stuff that will help mounted combat, but it will also help, everyone else in the game. It's always tough to devote a lot of time and energy and focus to a problem that affects a small subset of players. Usually the problem has to be really bad, like, hey, Runekeeper's LI satchels have disappeared, for us to really, do that sort of thing. And mounted combat, frankly, while it's not in great shape, it is a functional system where you can get through, and with the way that LIs function these days, most players can probably handle a number of those counters without even having to get on their horse if they don't want to.
All right, then we have one more question from TJ, and that is, what do we expect to change with the upcoming plans on a console release? Will console play alongside PC players? I guess I didn't even know there was a console release plan. So,
yeah, so we have nothing to comment on that at this time.
Okay.
When we have something to say, we will definitely let players know. But right now, there's nothing I can speak to there.
All right. Then let's go on to Squirrel. Squirrel asks, any plans for more evergreen and challenging solo or small group content?
I guess it depends on how you say small group, but yes, we do have more plans for stuff in the future. I don't think that, obviously we put stuff out with Den of Puglok and Salt Under Strock, which I think 3 players still counts as small group content. Maybe Houses of Rest and 6 player doesn't.
I'm pretty sure they mean 1, 2, and 3 is what Squirrel means for that. And in fact, it looks like that recently there's been actually a good amount for 1, 2, and 3. It's been the old. I mean, I noticed that when I'm going through a series of playing all of the instances that have solo support, and I've noticed at low level, there's practically nothing. The only thing at low level I can think is Woe of the Willow, which was added with, which was a more recent addition. We only added
with Wildwood last year.
That was with Wildwood last year. And in fact, I think that prior to Wildwood, I can't think of any. Oh, that's right. I think some of the Iron Hill. That's right. The Grey Mountains. That's right. The Grey Mountains instances, I think, are the first ones where I feel like they started adding solo support for these things. So I think more recently, I thought it's been pretty good on it. It's been anything prior to the Grey Mountains where I thought, and so low level support for such things, is very, very sparse.
Yeah, I mean, we did just add another player, another instance that can be done with small group, which is a festivity fireworks. So we're still adding content to that. Some of it is endgame, and some of it is decidedly not endgame. And that's okay, right? That's part of LOTRO, right? That's obviously something we've been doing with the Angle and Yondershire as well. So I think that we will certainly look for that and take advantage of that when that is the right opportunity for us. I don't think that by any stretch solo or small group content is going away, but it's not something that we. I don't know how to put this. Like, it's not like the biggest focus that we have. It's very much these days when we're adding any sort of group content, whether it's a 3, a 6, or a 12 player instance. We're usually looking and saying, okay, is this worth making solo, duo, or 3-player versions of? And obviously we do that for the 3-player ones and not the 12-player ones at this time. But that's the kind of stuff that there's a big conversation a few months ago, I want to say, about whether there should be more solo stuff beyond that. I don't have a strong opinion around that. For me, it's more about what it makes sense for the content and what can we support, as opposed to, we specifically have to plan for X numbers of instances that can do it.
Right. Okay. And any plans for returning one-off content such as treasure goblins, event servers like Bombadil? I'm not exactly sure what he means by this question, but
Seriously, aren't all goblins full of treasure?
yeah.
I mean, they're even the
count
ones
their
that are
guts.
just wearing their little like loin claws. You can still, as a burglar, like pickpocket them for some reason, which is I'm not going to think about that. But continue.
Well,
Sorry.
listen, if you are a kleptomaniac, you take what you can get.
That is exactly right. You pick all the pockets, even if there aren't pockets.
Well, then you pick some pockets you shouldn't have, probably. Don't think about it too hard. You'll regret it. Yeah, we'll continue to see some of the one-off content return. I'm pretty sure we have Treasure Bugan on the event calendar for later this year. I need to confirm that we're making some improvements to that later this year, because I don't remember where we settled on that. But yeah, there will be more one-off type stuff in the future. I don't think there's going to be a crazy amount of stuff this year. Certainly nothing as big as Bombadil. We did have a conversation about Bombadil the other day internally, just sort of going over that. It wasn't like a planned thing; it was more of an idle thing. I like the idea of that event, but there's more work that we need to do to get that into a place where it can really be an interesting experience more broadly. Like, the problem became, from what I understand, that after the first few days, folks really stopped engaging with the world PvP because of the way that we developed the scoring systems around it. So we need to take another look at that before we would do something like it. But there's definitely a lot of love for that internally, and I hear folks excited about it on the outside periodically as well.
All right. Now we have a question from MuckDuck5606, who is wondering about what the situation is relating to customer support.
Yeah, so customer support has continued to make progress on catching up. The last report I got from them is that they are getting reasonably close. Generally speaking, ticket times have gone down, and we, in the past few weeks, have eliminated the remaining blockers that we're aware of at this time, at least, for them to be able to resolve some of the longer standing issues that were delayed. So right now we're in this interesting place where there are some folks with tickets that are extremely old, like over a year old, that are still waiting for support because some of their requests are really gnarly. And we have a fair number of tickets that are, a couple, a day, a couple days, a week or two old. We've mostly cleared out everything in between. There are still some of the more difficult questions to answer and account-related problems that folks have, such as with fraud, for example, that require more investigation and tend to take a lot longer to resolve in general, that we're still working through. But we have less of this thing where, people just aren't getting responses at all. So things are improving. It's just that the worst cases are still not all resolved the way that we'd like them to be. But our hope is that in the coming weeks we make great progress. Hopefully we didn't screw CS too much with the downtime and the issues that we had to resolve and are still working to resolve. I'm sure they're getting a fair number of tickets about that on a consistent basis. But assuming that we're able to not dramatically increase ticket volume to CS, then they should be making a recovery towards getting to tickets in a matter of hours or days, as opposed to weeks in some cases, the way that things are still progressing right now.
All right. Now, Levicius has a question relating. He's pretty much looking for an auto match, looking for group feature. That sounds like something we had several years back that got rid of because it wasn't working all that too well. But he seems to feel that that's a must system in here. Has anyone thought of re-exploring it, seeing if we could implement it better than the last time you made such an attempt?
I think I've talked about this before, but one of the reasons that that system is not super useful right now is that player populations on all worlds are not conducive to filling groups effectively for all of the various instances in the world, right?
Right.
You know, if you want to run Great Barrows on level, it's going to be really tricky to find a group to put together if you're just relying on a random tool like that. Just the player pops aren't there. You're much better off asking in World Chat and getting some folks who aren't queued or wouldn't be interested in queuing for something like Great Barrows to come help you out. That sucks right now. So if we were to go down the road of trying to resurrect the matchmaking tool, what we would have to also do is probably let players from different servers and different worlds, rather, play together through it, right? If that looking for group random matchmaking tool pulled from all of the population as opposed to a small subset of the population, it would go better. I suppose the other way we could do that is if we consolidated a bunch of the worlds together, but that's not an experience that I really want to get into because it's definitely not something that we're thinking about in any serious way.
Kind of already did that once.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean even beyond that, right? Like right now, the player populations of the worlds are sometimes wildly disparate. Like, Evernight is very big and Cyrnon is very small, and that's great. Like Cyrnon, the community there tends to prefer it that way. So merging them with Evernight would not necessarily be a recipe for success for preserving both communities. But anyway, we don't have the tech at this time to allow players to play across worlds. It's not something that we can't do, but it's not something that's easy to do, and it's not something we're spending much of our time thinking about right now, let alone doing. So that's like the fundamental thing is that like having a matchmaking tool without having the player populations to actually fill it just ends up being an incredibly frustrating experience, which from my understanding is part of the reason that the original iteration of that tool went away and was replaced by the instance finder that currently exists. The instance finder still has its problems, absolutely, but it solves some of the issues that the previous tool had. I don't foresee us changing that in any serious way soon. I think we'd have to get our performance into a much better shape before we started seriously spending time thinking about how do we let players from different worlds play together, and then we probably also have to figure out how can we let an EU player and a North American player play together. I don't know that we necessarily have to solve that one, but depending on the math of like how many players we need to properly fill a matchmaking queue, we might need to solve that too. So there's a lot of thorny things to think through and work through before we're able to go down that kind of road.
And the joy of name collisions. I just can imagine a random champion on some server called Pineleaf, and I playing in the same group, and there is
that's less of an issue, I think. Don't quote me on that. But like we have dealt with name collisions already when we're talking about just normal transfers. So there's probably some sort of temporary solution that we can do for that kind of thing. But frankly, like there's other bigger problems to solve first. If we're able to solve those, name collision is a bit of a champagne problem.
Right. A minor problem compared to the rest of the problems. Got it. All right. Next questions are from Mr. Tonic Book Club, who asks, are there any new hobbies planned?
We've had several conversations about future hobbies. I mean, the tricky part with hobbies is it's something that has to be kind of like a vocation, but can't be a vocation. It has to fit into other parts of the game in a way that feels natural and not forced. And it has to be something that we can basically keep adding to without having to spend a huge amount of time, right? Anytime we would add something that requires new things, it's not just, okay, we made this thing and we can walk away and never think about it again. It's, okay, now we have to support this hobby moving forward, right? So there's just it's not just the let's make this thing because it'd be cool. It's okay. How then do we support this? The reward track is a good example of this, right? Part of the reason that we developed it in the way that we did was so that it was relatively easy to keep making new stuff. Once you have the initial version of the reward track, making new seasons is comparably trivial. So it's a super cheap support cost. So with the restrictions we have around that sort of thing, we haven't settled on what that next hobby could be or how it would work. And as a result, we don't have anything specific, but it is a conversation that happens a lot. There's a lot of love for the hobby system. There's a lot of interest in expanding that system from beyond just fishing. But we just haven't been able to crack that nut yet. I'm confident we'll get there, but I don't know when that'll be.
And Mr. Tonic Book Club also asks, are there any plans to make an all instances scalable? I think the answer to that is no, but let's see.
I mean, we sure would like to, but the reality is that a lot of the older, let's talk about Great Barrows again, right? That was built when that scaling tech didn't exist, and it was built when a lot of the tech that we use to make our instances these days didn't exist, or didn't exist in the form that it does today. So the folks that made those instances a lot of times are also no longer around, or even if they are, they maybe don't remember necessarily the ways that they solved a lot of the problems to make it work. So in order to do the kind of work to make things scalable, it's not just as simple as flipping a scalable switch. You kind of have to rebuild the instance. And that is a bit of a can of worms. There's a lot of work that would have to go into doing that sort of thing, not just having a content designer rebuild the instance, but having support from systems folks, world folks, engineers, artists, etc. It becomes a pretty big project pretty quickly. It's something we've talked about a fair number of times, and it becomes pretty momentous pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So it's not off the table, but it's one of those things that we'd have to be investing a lot of time and a lot of resources to make it happen, unfortunately.
Yes, and I'm sure that the ones that many people are thinking of are instances like Karn Doom, which I suspect is never going to get scaled, and the Rift, which I think people have always been saying is not going to be scaled. There are no plans for that one. Yeah,
I know there's a lot of love for the Rift, that SOA endgame, something I've heard a lot about. Like I said, I never say never, but it would be pretty tough to do. It's the kind of stuff where we would have to devote a lot of time to, or we'd have to throw a lot of people at it as well. So
yeah, I remember I remember back when the Great Barrow and Fornost and the Anuminous areas and Heligrod, when they were being made.
You can't even manage to break up the Rift, let alone scale the thing.
Yeah, that's the problem with it, is that, right, because a lot of them were broken up. Like, the Great Barrow is now 3 dungeons instead of 1 dungeon in order to make the whole thing work. And, yeah, the Rift would be a lot tougher to do something like that with. Heligrod at least had 4 very distinct wings that you could split up.
Yeah, the thing though is I don't even know if we could split it up, right? Because of the way that those were built, we'd have to look at how much are they looking at the other parts, and the actual physical footprint of the space and where it exists. And if we have to make changes to that, that could have impacts on the other parts of it. Yeah. So it's when we did Yondershire, we had to physically move Northcotton Farms because this part of the space that it was using was in where we were putting Yondershire. And that seems to have gone off reasonably well without us completely destroying that instance. But that one's from the Mirkwood era, I remember, or maybe it was Isengard. But that's an older instance it can be a bit finicky, and doing any sort of work around it can turn into a whole bucket of fun very quickly.
Yeah, that would have been back in because Galtrev is where you get the storyline quest, so it would be Isengard. Yeah.
After you call together the Great Company, they leave Middle-earth relatively undefended, and shenanigans happen.
Shenanigans happens, right?
That's the whole breakdown of that instance cluster in a nutshell. You're welcome.
Nice summary. Nice summary.
Nice.
I give it a 100.
All right. Let's see. All right. We have from Disnerd 937-49203. Will birds and small critters ever be able to rest on the player's shoulders?
Probably not the critter versions of them, but there's a cool emote in there somewhere, and maybe some armor pieces or cosmetic items.
I could see a shoulder piece with like a bird or a mouse or something perched on it. That'd be cool.
Yeah, I don't know technically if we have the ability to animate an armor piece in that way. Because you wouldn't want to just like a statue of a bird. You'd want it to like move around and stuff. That's an interesting idea, though. I like that. I don't know if we can do it, but
I mean, the animation is there to keep the cloaks moving, even when there's no wind.
That's true. I don't know though if that's baked in specifically to cloaks, though, or if that's part of wider tech that we can reuse. There's a lot of stuff in LOTRO, especially stuff from the early parts of the game, that is very, let's say, directed in terms of its usages.
Could you imagine your pets actually having that kind of animation? Every once in a while, they just suddenly, like your raven, suddenly goes and like lands on your shoulder or something.
Yeah, see, the problem with that is that then you would have people complaining that they don't act like real animals and you're not covered in poo. So maybe not revisit that idea.
You can please everybody some of the time, or some people all of the time. You cannot please all of the people all of the time.
Exactly.
Right. All right. Now here's a question from someone on the Treebeard server. Though I think this might have just been fixed in the latest update. We'll see. And that is, are we ever going to fix the 105 plus IXP runes dropping in the lowest level instances?
Yeah, that's something that we're looking at. Yeah, it's not ideal. I mean, we want to fix a lot of those issues, especially as we're making further progress in both Shadowfax and Treebeard. It's unfortunately not as simple as just being like, actually, it drops the exact same thing, but now it's going to be a level 45 rune or rune scale tier level. We don't have the capability to just do that on the fly. So we actually have to go back through and update those treasure tables for all of the places where that shows up throughout the game. So, we sort of did the shotgun approach initially, and now we have to go back and start doing more of the scalpel approach, and that takes a longer time.
Oh, that's right. I think you took care of it with one specific area. I forgot where it was, that there was some sort of reward pack that they were opening up where I think that you finally stopped giving 105 runes for. I forgot what boxes they were, though.
Yeah, I don't remember specifically, but it's something that I know that we want to do more of.
Right. All right. And Renegade asks, when do we expect to see UI scaling?
Yeah, that's a longer piece. I mean, I talked about UI updates earlier, and that sort of falls into the same category. It's something that we know we want to do, especially as more and more players are getting larger monitors. But it is not something that is imminent, unfortunately.
All right. And all right. Someone asked, Zibalbada asks, would there ever be a Brawler trainer in the 21st also that we could have a Brawler Moria set?
Yes. I won't tell you when, but yes.
Okay. All right.
Hold up. What? Dang you! You just keep your secrets then.
I will, yeah. Like any good wizard.
All right, let's see. And I think that's it for our questions for tonight. So, Calipathian, do you have any final questions?
I don't think so. Yeah. No questions from me right now, but I'm the kind of person that always winds up thinking of questions like after everything is done.
As soon as
They do,
message.
you have an interview and they're like, "Do you have any questions for us?" I'm like, "No, I think I'm good." And then once, they're like, "Oh, come back to us whenever, if you have some." And then like 3 days later, you think of a question and, you're like, "Well, it's been 3 days. I really don't want to ask." But no, I don't have any questions.
Well, this is great, and I enjoyed talking with you folks and answering questions. So I'm more than happy to come back at some point in the future. Probably not in 3 days, but
maybe
we can
when
find
you
some
release
time again,
update
I'm
34.
Sure, yeah, that might be a good time to do it. I'm happy to have the discussion at that time and see if it works.
All right, Terry, do you have any closing questions?
I don't, but I wanted to also say it was great to have you on. My wish list still includes Made of Lions, though. Not gonna lie.
Oh, I mean, I don't blame you. He's a really interesting guy to talk to. I mean, he's been on LOTRO for a long time. He's done almost all of it.
He's the story guy. He's written some of my favorite parts of the game.
Yeah, maybe we'll be able to work something out in the future.
Oh, please don't get my hopes up like that.
I can't make any promises. It's I can't make that decision. But never say never.
Yeah.
All right.
Huge Made of Lions fan.
Okay, so now Terry has the question: who does make those decisions? Just out of curiosity.
Well, it primarily involves Made of Lions himself, right? It's a function of his time and his comfort with that sort of thing.
I'm sure he is very busy.
He does have a lot on his plate, that's for sure.
Yes. All right. Well, that is it for tonight. And thank you for being here. And thank you, Terry Adwin and Calabathian, for joining me for this interview.
Yeah, and thanks so much for having me on and letting me talk a bit about LOTRO. Just to throw a shout out real quick, I just want to thank the team. They did an amazing job. Obviously, the past day and a half or so was really tough, and they did really strong work, and they got things done much faster than we probably would have otherwise if they weren't so talented at their job. So shout out to them, the whole studio at SSG, for supporting us. It was really nice, and thanks for the fans for sticking with us and waiting patiently for things to come back up. We had an amazing day today after things came up, and I can only hope that this weekend is even better. Update 33, a lot of big stuff. We talked about Yondershire. We talked about the anniversary gifts that we gave out, mostly the collector's editions, but obviously the Corgi, the Steed of Starlight, the Cloak, all the other things that we gave out as well. And we didn't even talk about all the huge amount of stuff really that is now free to play, including all the content released from the release of the game in 2007 through to the release, and including the release of Helm's Deep. That's a ton of stuff, all the way up to level 95 players can enjoy without having to ever give us $1. So, please find other ways to give us money so we can keep our jobs and keep LOTRO alive.
All right. Well, thank you for being here. And thank you, everyone, for listening. This is Pine Leaf Needles of LOTRO Players News, reminding you to skirmish responsibly.